fellow citizens, and the Coorong District Council members acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land and the waters, the Nurrunjeri people, whose ancestral lands are on which we meet today. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of Aboriginal people to country and pay our respects to elders past and present. We also extend that respect to all First Nation people. Thank you for that extra voice. Thank you, councillors. Number one, apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Hill, who is representing us at Wentworth at the Murray-Darling Association today. That is the only apologies we have. Number acknowledgements. I'd like to do several things in acknowledgements. First of all, I'd like to thank all the staff. There's a lot of staff involved in the running of the street party a couple of weeks ago. It was a very cleanly, beautifully run show from an administrative point of view for the community. That's what people report to me. So I'd really like to thank everyone for all the effort they put into that. I'd like to welcome down the back James Rendell as our new financial services or something coordinator. Welcome, James, from Western Australia. And lastly, I'd like to thank James Clark sitting next to me. We're going to have a lot of Jameses soon. That's one of the issues. James, as council will be aware, we've appointed a new director of roads and infrastructure, and James has been acting in the directorship role on and off for over 2 years, I believe now, in a variety of circumstances. So I'd very much like to thank James for that time, since he'll soon be able to go back to his normal job, as we might call it. So thank you very much, James, for that. Number two is confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 20th of April. Can someone move that way, please? Councillor Qualman. You're a seconder. Councillor Roundtree. Debate around that. Put the motion. All those in favour? All those in favour, Councillor Bland? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Adjourned business, we have nil. Number three. Number four, minute action list, councillors. Anything councillors wish to raise out of the minute action list, please? You'll be aware that the CEO, Bridget Mather, is on Zoom for this meeting until 5 o'clock, when she must leave. Anything from the minute action list, please? There being nothing, I move on. Questions with notice. Councillor Ling, you have the first one. The answer is there.
Yes. Satisfied, thank you.
Satisfied. Number two is Wadmore House, your question.
Similarly, it might be an appropriate point in the information document we're being provided. It appears the Canalpin swimming pool precinct has gone over budget, and there's an indication that the $60,000 for Wadmore House has actually been reduced. I'm just wondering from the CEO further confirmation of that, please, and how it was done.
So, Councillor Ling, I'll take that on notice and I'll get you a response for that.
That's have to be taken on notice.
Yep.
You also got the next question, I believe.
Yeah, ask
Good.
for
Councillor, yes.
Can you just put your...
Yes,
everyone's
Councillor.
complaining about it online. Sorry.
Name tags around, please, councillors. I put them there for your
I'm around, am I on?
seating benefit. Councillor Bland, get that mic working close to you.
In relation to the Wadmore House precinct as well, and I understand by the report that the electrical and water was finished, did we actually see a detailed report of actually what was done, as against saying it's just completed? What did they actually do? I've certainly seen some of the work on the outside of the building. Very obvious, it looks great, but I would be appreciated to know what has been done in relation to the water, having known the issues in the past. Thank you.
We'll through you, Mayor, we'll provide that.
Thank you.
Okay. Move on to your third question, councillor, around the Menengi North Jetty. Advise the meeting that we have a meeting coming up in the next couple of weeks with Mr. Tony Passon, the CEO, and myself, and We are well aware of the importance of involving him in openings of substantial projects which the federal government's funded. Anything else, councillor?
No, I'm satisfied with the answer. I believe there's going to be communication with the sailing club and things coordinated as we come out of winter, and the foreshore precinct is dressed up as well. I understand that the portion of the jetty that needs the decking replaced is taking place very soon, so it'd be good to have it all fixed up. Bit of delay in opening, but better for an overall outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And your question is also the fourth question in relation to the line markings there at the boat ramp at Menengi.
Yes, again, I'm satisfied, although I query why there wasn't a CRM raised on the issue. I know there's a lot of discussion took place in email. Why wasn't a CRM seen fit to be entered?
Bridget, do you want to give an outline of what circumstances CRM wouldn't be raised?
If it's generally between a councillor and one of the staff, sometimes that happens. If it's a resident, it's always a CRM raised. So on this occasion, you could argue that it probably should have been put in place because it was a third party, but it didn't on this occasion. There's no reason why that didn't happen, but there was certainly staff working on it.
Yes, the original issue was raised by an SES member at the Menengi office, which apparently was never put through from the office. Hence, I followed up on it.
So through you, councillor, we'll follow up to see whether we have any record of that.
Thank you.
Okay, the fifth question is Councillor Taylor's.
All good.
All good. There'll be a response around the costings of the street party and country market at the June ordinary council meeting. And the last question is also yours, Councillor Taylor, in relation to the possibility of a toilet at the Tail, what was the Tail and Bend CFS shed?
No, it was a question of whether a toilet in the playground could be connected.
Yes.
So would it be possible to connect a terrain type of toilet to the CFS shed end? Oh, yes, you're correct. Shed end of the playground, Tail and Bend. So there is a response there. I understand there's been some discussion in the community around this.
There has, extensive.
So did you wish to take it further, or we just wait for the...
I'll just wait.
Perhaps we wait till we get the first lot of toilets built, might be the best. Councillor Yench.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In regards the old CFS shed, I believe we haven't taken control of it back as yet due to some hazardous material in sight that has to be sorted out. On speaking with a few others recently, I have become vaguely aware, and I'm only vaguely aware because I'm not sure if it's correct, that there may be some material that is toxic on site, and the toxic material being the chemicals used in firefighting. There may be spillage or whatever, some level of contamination. So prior to council taking back ownership of that building, we do need to tie those two things up, particularly from the point of view of the playgrounds being so close. But if we take ownership, my understanding of the system is we then inherit whatever problem comes with it. So until it is resolved, we need to be very careful.
Certainly. Bridget, would you like to just confirm that? There's two issues there with that building if we're to resume control, isn't there?
So with the CFS shed and with any building that comes into our care and control, I've asked them to make good before we bring it back into, so really whatever condition it, and I don't know how long ago this was, but we don't want it back basically until it's made good. There is contamination issues. Generally with any firefighting areas, there's always the option that there's PFAS present. That has varying levels within, and generally it's more prevalent in an airport and places like that, but CFS are well aware and they'll make good before they give it back. The other thing that I would say with the CFS shed is that if and when we take it back as a council, it is probably something that would be of interest to a community group. And so I know there's been some discussions in the community about toilets and the public toilets, but I would imagine that if a community group took it over, the toilets would be for their use, not for the public use. So maybe the toilet discussion for the playgrounds is a separate one to the CFS shed.
Okay.
Mr Mayor, can I just make a comment?
Well,
it
is very briefly, but it is a question. So.
Regarding the question, why, and I would like a report on this, why would council take over another asset which we have to maintain? Unless there is a very, very good reason to take it over and a use. You know, we've got enough assets to look after now. If you look at our asset report, we're not keeping up with the depreciation figure. So adding another one, so I would like a report in full, because it's not up to staff to make that decision, it's up to the council members.
At this stage, we're just waiting for them to correct the issues with the land. I'm just going to, Councillor Kwame, then I'm going to finish it.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was reading somewhere else in the agenda though, doesn't the CFS have the right to do, bring it up to scratch before they dispose of it under law, or compulsory they get it up to, you know, a safe standard before handing it over?
I think that's the path we're pursuing.
Yeah.
Can't hand it back. Perhaps Wadmore House was handed back. Not a similar comparison. Okay, the question's sort of been answered there in the short term, and I think councillors are where we were going. We move on to questions without notice. Councillors, Councillor Rountree.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to also just move a motion that my questions, that the answers to these questions get recorded. I was told that had to be a motion.
Correct.
So I'd like to move that the answers to these questions get recorded in the minutes, please.
Right.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Moved Councillor Rountree, seconded Councillor Ling. I think I'm hearing that the answers to the questions without notice be recorded.
I think that's a motion without notice, isn't it? Through you, Mayor?
It is. Yeah.
So where did the questions come up then through you, Mr Mayor?
I think this is some subject for some further advice, to be quite honest. We do generally record the answers.
Question.
Hang on.
I've recorded just before with full favour of the council.
It's
I was told it had to be a motion.
up to the members.
Yes, we need to vote on that.
So, councillors, I'd really want to seek some more advice on even putting that motion. So,
Is it a motion or a notice?
well, it really is a motion on notice, or it should be in my view, or a change in the meeting procedure.
Mr Mayor,
You can actually move afterwards that the answers be recorded, but I would suggest moving it before is a bit presumptuous.
Mr Mayor, in the past, with leave of the full council, that has been done, questions and answers with notice.
And through you, Mr Mayor, that was also the advice when I've tried to do this before, when I wanted answers recorded, I was told by Deb that the answers you had to have a motion to have that done.
So through you, Mayor, it's correct. There has to be a motion, but in terms of the current place we are in the meeting procedures, we're on questions with notice. So it can't be a motion without notice until we get to that part of the agenda, Councillor.
Through you, Mr Mayor,
I believe that is incorrect.
We are at
Local
questions
Government
without
Act.
notice.
This is a question without notice.
Okay.
And in accordance with meeting procedures, if the answer is required to be recorded, a motion must be passed and agreed to by the council.
It's legislation.
We did this before.
And through you, Mr Mayor, they're not difficult questions. I just want the answers recorded.
So through you, Mayor, the questions can be recorded. They're on the video, the questions and the answers. Can I suggest through you, Mayor, that Councillor, maybe the questions could be with notice and then the answers definitely are recorded?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the questions have only come up since I've seen the agenda, so otherwise I've got to wait another month and I'll forget.
And just give me just a second to read this.
The alternative is then they have to remove this to.
Mr Mayor, we might suggest we vote on the motion.
When I'm ready to put it. Question without notice and the reply will not be entered in the minutes of the relevant meeting unless the members present at the meeting resolve that an entry should be made.
Yes.
And the presiding member may rule that a question with or without notice not be answered if the presiding member is vague, irrelevant, insulting or improper.
That's correct.
It's at your discretion for each
Council
one.
may resolve to record an answer within the minutes. I'm going to disallow the motion. Afterwards, if councillors wish the question to be put in the minutes, it'll have to be done individually per question, not in grouping.
Okay, then.
Have you got a question, councillor?
I have 3 of them, thank you. First one, can the CEO please provide a copy of the exit interview questions along with an explanation of how the exit interview is conducted and by whom? That's the first one, and I would like the answer recorded, please.
With
So,
the
yeah.
exit,
So, Bridget,
so through you, Mayor, I can supply a copy of the blank exit interview, and the exit interview is generally done by the person supervisor. I get to see all of them.
Sorry, through you, Mr Mayor, the person supervisor, so the actual person's direct line supervisor.
Correct.
So through you, Mr Mayor, I believed before it was done by, is it Ben? Did he not do them before?
who? One of our coordinators.
Human resources.
I don't know, councillor. I'm taking the
through
advice.
you, Mayor-
Has that been the same for a while, Bridget?
So as long as I've been there, it's the direct supervisor. Ben may have a place in helping with that, but the direct supervisor. So if it's one of Deb's staff, she will do it because it's a fairly flat structure in there. If it's with James's department, it could be with one of the managers in there, but the director and the CEO see those exit interviews.
Through you, Mayor, is the questions done verbally or on paper, or are they done in front of the supervisor?
It could vary depending on if the person's still in the organisation or is on leave, but it is on paper. It's a recorded exit interview on paper.
Thank you. So can that response be recorded, please?
Leave of the meeting, you can, meeting happy for that response to be recorded?
Yep.
Resolved? Someone move that way then? Councillors Lang and Bland on the first one. Discussion? Question be recorded. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Your second question is?
Well, just a clarification here. We haven't seen the answer written up there, so how can we vote on it that it's the correct answer? It's not typed up yet.
Yeah, I know. The answer will... Yeah, I can't ask for it to be unless there's a motion either.
I know this is the conundrum we find
well,
ourselves in. I feel for Ashley
We'll be
here,
seeking some further advice on the process.
because otherwise we've just voted and we have
I
no
would
idea what
urge
we're
you
voting
councillors
for.
to put them on
Thank you.
notice.
Yes, like I said, Mayor,
People
only
as frexacious,
decide to do these.
know that in relation to staff, we need to be careful. Are you
Absolutely.
taking another question?
Yes, I do. I have another one. Thank
Second
you.
number question, right.
Mr Mayor, could I just,
No.
may I suggest that it is already recorded because it is recorded
I know
there,
that.
although not paper.
That's why
But I still want to see the words.
That's why I will seek further advice.
Thank
Number
you.
2 question, councillor Roundtree.
Yes. Can the CEO please provide a date at which access to confidential agendas and minutes will be made available to elected members online? I think we need to lock a date in of when this can actually happen. We're coming near to the end of our term and this has been languishing out there for quite a while, and I know they're busy, but we need to set a timeline on when this will be.
There's historic confidential items that are offline at the moment due to the changeover in the system.
Yep.
Bridget?
So through you, Mayor, I'll have to take that on notice to confirm a date.
Can I move then the answer be recorded, please?
Yes, you can. Councillor Roundtree moves that question be taken on notice. The CEO will respond. There a seconder? I'm going to take Councillor Qualman on this one. Any debate? I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. I'm waiting now. Councillor Roundtree and Councillor Qualman seconded. Have you got more, Councillor Roundtree?
One more, thank you, Mayor. Can the CEO please provide elected members with an updated org chart that includes positions and names of employees plus their FTE so that we know who's who in the zoo?
So through you, Mayor, I have that in my emails. I just haven't sent it out yet. That was a question you asked me, Councillor Roundtree, a week or so ago. I just haven't got round to it. I'm sorry about that. I'm just thinking the other thing is, and this is a question of process, I don't think, hang on, I've got one. You can vote on the answer. You can just vote on it being recorded. I know that's a fine line.
We're going to seek some more advice around this process.
Because through you, Mayor, the answer in a sense is the answer, but it's a vote on being recorded, isn't that?
That's the way I look at it.
Yes.
Which is sort of is. Given that we're now live streamed, it sort of is recorded, but that's why we need to get some more advice. Councillor, are you going?
Yes, thank you.
Yes,
I'm done.
You're done. I've got any other councillors? Councillor Qualman and I think Councillor Arthur.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is regarding the bollards project out in front of the council building. To the CEO or the directors, I see Deb's not here, even though she was shown on the up on as present. What's been the community feedback since we physically got a barrier there and we've lost 4 car parking spots? Anybody enlighten me? From the community, has there been some negative backlash, or a lot, or none?
Perhaps just for the director of Deb is unwell.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, sorry, for everyone's benefit. Bridget, do you want to start this?
I can. So, and James chip in, but we had, when it was originally flagged with the community, which is 12 months ago, and I think I put that in my email to you, we had, from memory, 2 people who had a negative view about it. When we did it this time round, we talked with all the traders. I haven't heard any negative feedback come through apart from, I think maybe one councillor, but I haven't heard anything else. Sorry, that's wrong. I did have one councillor raised with me a gentleman who had concerns about it, and I rang that gentleman. And that's the only one I'm aware of.
The process where we're at with it.
I'm also aware of one other communication from a local business on the main street asking background to fruition, basically. So we're providing a response to that.
So, councillors, as you may be aware, this whole project originated probably nearly 2 years ago out of threats to the staff at the front desk through someone driving through the building. And the issue with the bollards became the telecommunications front of the building. So the present arrangement will satisfy the position of stopping people perhaps driving straight through the front of the building. I'm aware of complaints about basically loss of car parking spaces in the town. The first thing I think we could say is that council staff will no longer be parking on Railway Terrace here in Tale and Bend. Probably free up 1 or 2 on average. We determine which area the disabled car park will be moving. They'll be moving towards Willow Street precinct.
Through Mr Mayor, the disabled car park will move to basically out the front of where the town. So it still has unimpeded access to that ramp car park.
And also that's where the bus pickup point will be. Willow Street. Councillor Yench.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I did field a reasonable number of comments, some of them angry. I know that they spoke to the CEO, yourself and another councillor. It is intriguing. I wish to flag that I will have a motion without notice in regards to this issue when it is appropriate. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Councillor Coleman, you're happy?
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Arthur, did you have a question
This is a bit.
without notice?
I have a question without notice on behalf of quite a stream of ratepayers regarding when will the rollers be behind the graders again?
James?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the INA committee on the 27th of April noted that before the 6 weeks, the still no extension periods are still before 6 weeks. So that leaves us with just check the date, possibly another couple of weeks to happen.
Second question that's come up, if the hitches on the rollers were not compliant, is council taking any action against the manufacturers?
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Arthur, we answered that question at the INA committee in full and in a question on notice at the last ordinary meeting. Nothing has changed since those answers were given to you, and it's actually the hitch design, not the actual plant itself. I can recirculate that question and the answer that happened at the last ordinary meeting, but nothing has changed since that time.
Okay, that now it is recorded, because if you read the minutes and the agenda for the INA meeting, it tells you exactly nothing, because nothing was recording at the last INA meeting at Sherlock. These are questions that the people are asking me. They're the questions I ask you.
Okay. Response is within 2 or 3 weeks, we would hope to have them on. Now, the hitches on the grade is the problem, not the rollers, it appears. Any other questions without notice? Okay, move on to reports by members. Councillors, my report is there, except I did not attend on the 24th, the River Murray Football League Anzac game at Murray Bridge. Sorry.
What about us, that one, Mr. Mayor?
Usually when I attended the Ramblers Footy Club rooms, I usually got beaten on. So. By James, of course. That's anything else in that there? Councillor Bland, you wish to add? Sorry, hang on. I might just comment on Murraylands and Riverland Local Government Association, if I may. The region, the delegates, which is the mayors, are very concerned about the lack of available housing region or regional Australia, and it is a process that I wish to start pursuing more actively. We're aware that the Tatiara and Narracourt Lucendale Council are probably doing part of a pilot with some federal government authorities, but I'd have to say that became the talking point of the meeting, was the unavailability of housing and how that will constrain economic development if we don't get on to freeing up land or getting people to reinvest in housing stock across the district, the region. And I've attended the official opening of the Tale and Bend CFS station, the new one. That's a 4-bay station, very big, and it was very, all the top people from CFS were there, and very lovely day. Councillor Bland, your report.
Answer any questions if needed.
The Hill is not here, but her report's there. Councillor Lang, your report. Yeah, you don't wish to add anything?
No, that's all. Thank you very much.
Very extensive again. Okay. Move on to number 711, your revocation motion. Councillor Ling. You're moving that way.
I so move.
Is there a seconder?
Second for debate.
Councillor
Mr. Mayor.
Yench is the seconder. Councillor Ling, you wish to speak to your revocation motion?
I was going to leave it to last, but I'll open. I will say that I was one of the councillors who did agree with this motion, not against it. In fact, I would still like to see something done, and I've actually got some ideas of my own regard to the barge and the association of the river with the old paddle steamer period. But we do open all of our meetings with acknowledgement of the traditional owners or custodians. And I'm very concerned with Aboriginal heritage sites being having works done on them now under the Heritage Act information. You'll find that a lot of river sites or sites close to the water will be affected by Aboriginal heritage. I knew that there was something along the cliff face. There's more than I actually thought, as it's turned out. And in fact, I've only recently found out that Dixon's Reserve is also affected with middens. And I also am aware of another site where megafauna has been located. So there is a archaeological dig also taking place in the cliffs. Let us respect our acknowledgement and not make it a lip service. Let us respect the traditional owners, past and present, and Aboriginal heritage sites. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go with Councillor Coleman next, then Councillor Roundtree.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. But the way I interpret the motion, the original motion here, it says in order to conduct a feasibility study. Now, to me, that feasibility, we aren't doing anything. We're just going around asking questions. And I think the intent is that we would be working with the Indigenous people and the NAC. So this is what we should be doing more of, is working together with them. After all, see if we can, as a team, do things with respect. And I always respect our elders. However, I think that this motion should still stand. Simple as that.
Councillor Roundtree.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Lang seems not to have understood what that motion was and seeking to achieve, as explained by Councillor Coleman, is to consult with the Indigenous owners and wider community and to seek grant funding for a feasibility study. Obviously, historical cultural investigations would form part of any consultation process and feasibility study. Despite the very long history lesson that was provided by Councillor Lang, he has not provided any strong reasoning as to why investigating this proposal should not proceed, except for perhaps maybe a personal one. In curiously claiming that identified parts of the river can't or shouldn't be developed is ignorant. There was no specific site proposed, as this would form part of the study. Additionally, and importantly, Councillor Lang is not in a position to speak on behalf of Indigenous peoples, who in fact may be interested in whether or not such a theatre could strengthen cultural awareness. And for that reason, I strongly oppose this revocation motion.
Okay, Councillor Tale is next.
Through you, Mayor, obviously the original motion was brought about because of consultation with some of the community members. As I said before, it's not my motion. It is the wish of the community. They're the ones that have indicated that it would be a fantastic opportunity to create strong relationships with the Indigenous community of the district, and especially for tourism. My personal view of this is that it is driven by the Indigenous community. It is a perfect opportunity for Indigenous artworks. It's also a perfect opportunity to create something perhaps out of recycled materials, so there is less of an ongoing cost. But it's an ideal opportunity to forge great relationships with the Indigenous community. The original motion does not indicate any site location, and the site location would be driven by the Indigenous community, and therefore the motion stands as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, Councillor Yench.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. But I agree that it should not go ahead, but I do draw to the fact that we do have a $25,000 in the budget item for this. This speaks of seeking grant funding. Fortunately, we know that the grant funding aspect is a bit thin on the ground with some of these things. I too have spoken to a number of people, and I have spoken to a number of local Indigenous people who did express concern to me that of its inappropriateness. I spoke to members of the community house who approximately 4 years ago raised this idea, and it is a brilliant idea. I have no doubt about that at all. But they dropped it due to lack of getting seed funds for feasibility studies. The lady in question who brought this up, I then spoke to her, Helen Bowring, and we spoke at length on her idea, and she's very passionate about this.
I have a point of order, please, here, Mayor. Neither the Ms. Bowring or the community centre are here to verify these comments, and therefore naming them in a public arena is inappropriate.
Yes, that's correct. So just speak to your motion.
That's fine, Mr. Mayor. I think that's petty, but that's fine. The location that was picked out initially was north of the Taylor Bend pumping station on a piece of land in there. I disagree with the concept of the plan being on the river here. I think the concept has broader connotations and benefit for the whole district. I think it needs to be fleshed out further, that there may be a more appropriate site somewhere else in the district, whether it be at Meningie or whether it be at the lake at Tintinara or whether it be at Pangaringa at Wellington East. The inappropriateness cost to council of $25,000 for me is unacceptable. Thank you.
Any other councillors want to speak for or against? Councillor Bland.
Actually, I'm going to ask a question. And in relation to this, and it seems to me that while not everybody, doesn't appear to me that everybody's actually against the concept of a theatre in relation particularly to Aboriginal peoples. The concern seems to be that we seem to have defined, and I'm not convinced whether we have or not, other than it says an open air theatre on the edge of the Murray River, defined a space that may or may not be a problem with the Aboriginal peoples when consulted. So my question is, do we believe that the original motion defines a space enough to actually withdraw this, to have this motion revoked? And I'm a little bit unclear. I hear two sides of it here, one saying yes and some saying no. And I would therefore refer that to the CEO through you, Mr. Mayor, or yourself.
Certainly, I'm looking at Bridget in Wentworth and asking if you got a view, and then I'll give you my view.
So the motion, as I understood it, was not to define any space. It was about a feasibility study of the suitability of a theatre somewhere along the Murray River. Now, in that feasibility study, as most feasibility studies, it would also probably identify other suitable spaces. So at this point, no spot. There may have been some historic conversations around this that other people in the room are aware of, but this particular motion has just asked council to do a feasibility study, and by definition, the feasibility study would also find a suitable location, and then, as some of you in the room have mentioned, that suitability would be premised on lots of things. It would be on the Indigenous issues surrounding a particular spot. It would also be, because it's near the water, there would be many, many stakeholders in a feasibility study for a project such as this. And this is the very beginning of the process. And there has been no work done on this and no spot at all identified.
Thank you. So, Councillor Arthur, I will speak.
Just quickly,
Speaking.
I think the motion speaks for itself after consultation with Indigenous owners of the land and wide interested communities. But the second part is the part that worries me. Council seek grant funding in order to conduct the feasibility study. Now, all of a sudden, we've whacked $25,000 into the budget. So the council's actually paying that. That is against what the motion says here. It is to get grant funding to the feasibility study. And the feasibility, one of the parts of the study will be to talk to the Indigenous owners, as it says in the first sentence. after consultation with Indigenous owners. So I can't see how this motion even rates.
Okay, so I'm going to read out the motion that this motion is seeking to revoke. And that is that after consultation with Indigenous owners of the land and wider interested communities, council seek grant funding in order to conduct a feasibility study to scope the design and construction of an open-air theatre on the edge of the River Murray under the project name Tangalang Floating Theatre. 2 or 3 things come to mind for me. I am aware that in the proposed council budget for 21-22, there's an amount of apparently 25,000. Council in a couple of weeks gets the chance to put that budget out to public consultation so the public can make a judgment on whether we got grant funding or we did it ourselves. Second thing is I see this as an opportunity to engage with our Indigenous Aboriginal Australians around this piece of land, and I understand that it doesn't restrict itself to this piece of land. A lot of the community are considering a piece of land from Fred's Landing back to effectively the Tail and Bend pumping station as a piece of land that's open to perhaps this. That's one of the choices of land, but I think that's the one that most people are referring to in this debate. But I see it as an opportunity to engage with the NAC. Now we are nearly to the point of that formal engagement procedure, and as a first step in a lot closer relationship with the Nurrunjeri Aboriginal Corporation. Is there anyone else wish to speak for or against? We're just about done. You will close, Councillor Lang.
Close.
This is a motion to revoke. There is no amendment. If you vote for the motion, the motion will be revoked. If you don't, it will stay. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is lost. So the motion is lost with Councillors Yench and Leng voting for it. Councillors Bland, Arthur, Rountree, Taylor, Bowman and Simmons voting against it. Thank you, councillors. Next notice of motion, is there a notice of motion? Yes, there is, 7.1.2. Councillor Lang.
Thank you. I picked up on community vibes in regard to possible need for a toilet for more, I think, young children during toilet training stages, not being able to hold their bladder to get to the toilets 200 metres away, and the need for a nursing room perhaps to be provided. I've been told about the CFS shed, which I thought actually had been handed over to us already. I don't think the comments that are being made about the CFS shed toilet or building toilet is appropriate, as that we've never had anything to do with those toilets, so we don't know the size and capacity of those toilets at the moment. I believe a feasibility study be conducted as proposed to consider a low budget conversion of the building to suit the needs of carers. We can't say mothers or parents, got to be carers. And hopefully we can use the existing septic until the funds become available to connect into the swim system, which I believe would be 80 to 100 odd thousand for the digging, etc. So, thank you.
Okay, councillor, is there a seconder? Councillor Yench, seconder.
I would like to speak, but also indicate that a potential part amendment, if the mover would consider, Mr. Mayor, and that is that this be done in conjunction with the CEO's process of winding up the ownership of the CFS shed and coming back to council that it be part of that process rather than a process of its own, because it still depends upon what comes with the shed. So it needs to be part of that process that the CEO is potentially already engaged in with CFS, with revoking their use and council receiving it back in a safe manner.
You and the mover need to settle on your words pretty quick.
So therefore, I request that the mover add in that this be done in conjunction with CEO's formalised meetings with CFS for reacquisition of said building. I'm happy for any variation on that.
Question?
Councillor, yeah, in a second.
I'll accept that.
You're going to accept that. Councillor Ling accepts that little add, which is that, and this be done in conjunction with the CEO's formalised process for reacquisition of the CFS building. Councillor Tale is first.
Through you, Mayor, how do I bring an amendment for that?
Got the floor at the moment.
Then I'd like to amend that as the council conduct a feasibility study for the placement of standalone toilet and septic within the playground.
Totally separate to the motion.
Yep, point of order, Mr Mayor. That is a separate motion.
Mayor, it's just a different motion, but with the same outcome, providing toddlers with a place to go to the toilet. So it's similar.
It's a separate motion.
Bridget, have you got a view? It's the same toilet, different sites.
Through you, Mayor, I think that the intent is that it seems to me the intent is for toilets in the playground. The CFS is opportunistic in a sense. It could be quite a long way away. The comment that it could be linked to a report about whether the CFS comes back to us once it's in a fit state to do so may be some time off. So maybe you do it in 2 different motions.
Yes.
Yep.
Through you, Mayor, do I talk to it now or later?
Going to let the first motion run its course, but it is substantially different in its ways. But then I will allow you, since we're on the subject of toilets in that area, probably move that motion that was in front of me. Councillor, so we're going to the original motion of Councillor Leng's at this stage. Councillor Roundtree.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a bit of a slap in the face to the Salt Creek people who've been wanting a toilet for so long, and here we are looking at considering perhaps a new toilet in Taylor, and the Salt Creek community have been begging for a toilet for a very long time. I think we just need to be mindful of what this looks like from a public perception point of view, that we've had Councillor Lang voted against having Salt Creek toilets and puts up.
Keep the other councillors' names out of it, please.
My fellow councillor voted to not have toilets at Salt Creek. And now we're moving this way. I just think it's not a great look for us at this particular point when there are higher priorities.
Okay.
I take offence to that.
And I've noted that councillor shouldn't mention your name.
Apologies, Mayor.
And in fact, I recommended to this council for the building of toilets down to the Salt Creek regulator, which was changed by certain other councillors. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Mayor.
This motion, councillor.
Through you, Mayor. No, I know the inside of the CFS building. The toilet is in the middle at the back wall. Therefore, the toilet would require an outside door if it were to be put in. And it was alluded to on social media that the cost for alterations would just be around about $4,000. Well, we know that it takes a considerable amount to alter a building, and to make safe a room which would have children and parents within it. But it opens out onto the railway line, if you like, so it's hardly safe. It's also a sizable structure, and removing the toilet for public use would then cause problems with anyone that wanted to use that building, should that building be in council's care and control. So apart from the fact we don't have care and control of that building yet, I just think it's an insult to any woman who has had to breastfeed their children in what should be a comfortable and amenable facility, which would be a parenting room or a breastfeeding room.
Okay, we're still on the Councillor Lang's motion. Councillor Bland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In relation to the motion itself, I have some problem with the motion and with the accepted changes in that until such times as a formalised process for acquisition, if there is a acquisition or reacquisition of the CFS shed building, I do believe we've put the cart before the horse. Now, I don't have an issue with breastfeeding matters, and I've been here now long enough to have previous councillors tell me, love or hate Menengi toilets, that when I tried to put a similar thing into the Menengi toilets, I was allowed a chair and a fold-down nursing table and got told, you don't need any more. My wife had to feed in the car by councillors. So it's lovely to see that we've moved a long way, which is I'm extremely pleased about. So having said that, I do not believe we are at a point of making a decision about the CFS building as yet. I do not believe this council has made that decision.
No, this council hasn't made any decisions around the old CFS building opposite the police station in Untitled Chapter.
So I do believe that it's premature to make any decision that will affect budgeting in the short term.
That's correct. And just councillors, just for the nursing room facilities, that's the point of the next motion. There is a policy. I have a copy of the policy around that. Lovely. Councillor Arthur on this one.
Listen, really quick comment once again. I didn't realise that this council had passed that we would take over the CFS shed. It is still subject to a feasibility study. So until that feasibility study is done, these motions are a waste of time. After the feasibility study, then have a look what we can do. I'll be voting against it because it's surmising that we're taking over the CFS shed.
Yes, it does. I'm afraid. Anyway, anyone else? This Councillor Lang will close at this point, and I'd note that we've got I suppose a foreshadowed motion around a close by site around this. And I'd also note that right at this point in time we haven't got the new toilet block in the middle of town either, which may have one of those rooms suitable for what Councillor Bland was talking about.
I could only hope.
Only hope. Councillor Lang. Opposed, thank you. I'm going to put the motion.
Today. Not necessarily.
All those in favour? Those against? It's lost 6-2. Councillors Lang and Jensch were for it. Balance of the councillors were against it. Sorry, Councillor Taylor, you had indicated you could move a motion which...
Yes, as Ashley has republished on the screen, the council conduct a feasibility study for the placement of a standalone toilet and septic within the Turnberg playground. The feedback on social media was mixed as to whether it should be in the playground or not in the playground. However, Placing it in the playground, hopefully with day use, gives access to mothers who have more than one child. And if the toilet itself is large enough, it can have nursing facilities within it and, of course, changing facilities within it. The problem is a connection to the CWMS scheme, and therefore perhaps it's time that we looked at standalone septic solutions such as bioseptic. And whilst there is a cost involved, we would hope that the usage would be less than the standard toilet block, principally because people in there would be parents and their children. It gives a much better feel to the playground. It's in line, if you like, to other playgrounds fairly close to our district, which are also addressing the issue of having a toilet within the playground. The playground has indeed got a large amount of positive feedback from further afield than just our district. And therefore I feel it's time for it. And just for the sake of clarity, this is to conduct a feasibility study, not to assign any cash or a budget or monies, but to conduct a feasibility study for the placement. Hopefully out of the feasibility study will be a costing, and hopefully out of a costing, we might be able to attract grant funding rather than put it.
Yes. Is there a seconder? I'm going to take Councillor Qualman as the seconder. You want to speak, Councillor?
Oh, just briefly, Mr Mayor, that I totally concur what Councillor Tale is saying. A little bit different scenario. We have obviously got care control of the playground, so let's do the study, and the community were made aware of our intentions, and we'll get back and provide the relevant information which way we go.
Thank you. I might just add that some of the community would like the RV dump point moved. Community, there's various sites of various acceptability around that, but it would be a combination of the previous motion, this motion, and that process might get a Guernsey eventually. I'm going to take Councillor Bland and Councillor Yench.
Mr Mayor, I don't disagree with requiring other toilets, but in relation to the feasibility side of it, I would like to be inclusive, not just of site, but of ongoing costs, because it's yet another toilet to clean. I have no issue with toilets for children, nursing spaces for mothers, etc. But we do need to know all of the costs that will be associated in the long term, however that might look.
Feasibility study for the placement. So I suppose, but I think that's
Placement's probably a little bit
loose. I think it would be brought up. Councillor, you done?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm happy with I think.
I'm happy to amend that to placement and costs.
I'm happy with that
Yep.
too.
Councillor Yench. Councillor Yench.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'm not opposed to the motion. Quite frankly, we need to verify, again, what the public requirements are for our community. I do think it's a shame that we haven't finished the one that we're building within a few hundred metres. And I will add that the vote to place that one in that location did go 8-1 for that location, and I was the one who opposed. Thank you.
Certainly. Okay, any further debate around this motion without notice? We'll close, Councillor. Close, thank you. I put the motion as it is. Councillor Taylor moves, Councillor Qualman seconds that council conduct a feasibility study for the placement and costs of a standalone toilet and septic within the Taylor Men playground. For the motion, all those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Number 7.1.3, Councillor, is nursing room facilities. Councillors, we have actually got a policy, so Councillor Ling, you moved it, would be, I think at time if you followed up that policy, updated and reinvigorated. I think that's what you're going towards.
Adopted, we have no current staff left that are familiar with.
No, I got Ashley. Endorsed in July 2015. strategies to create an environment that supports and encourages mothers to breastfeed. So there is actually a policy direction available. You can move nonetheless.
I move.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Bland. Is there any discussion around this
Perhaps I could make a couple of reinforcing this is that it was discovered there weren't many places identified and there were logos placed on doors of shops or spaces that were prepared to encourage nursing mothers to utilise the facilities, given that toilets like some of us have are not conducive necessarily to be an appropriate space for nursing mothers. So it was not only looking at council's own buildings and staff, but also looking at the wider public. And if appropriate department looks at it, they will find that it's actually labels to go on doors when they do.
Councillor Bland, you were in the photo in the press release in 2015.
Yes, with holding someone else's child.
Councillor Arthur.
And just if we have a look outside, there is a decal on the mirror out there telling us this is a breastfeeding
Space.
facility.
What did you?
All the council depots were made, Meningie, Titanara.
What do you call the word? A decal.
Decal.
Right. Councillor
It's out
Tale.
there.
Just for clarification, through you, Mayor, so there is currently nothing on the website?
So you, Mayor, that is correct. We will ask them to update their sites to show us as a breastfeeding friendly establishment. We only became aware of that after Councillor Lang asked that question. So we still have the accreditation. We just haven't, I don't know why we've disappeared off their website, but we will get that changed.
It's not on the website at this stage, at the moment.
This, Mayor, is there a wider website?
Through you, Mayor, it's through the Breastfeeding Association. They're national bodies and they're the ones where most women would look if they were looking for a breastfeeding friendly place. I would suggest that most people wouldn't look on a council website for that information.
So they did take a look at the site, as they mentioned, and it does show places such as Myers in the middle of Adelaide, etc. There isn't anything from the Coorong district on that website.
Sorry, Councillor.
So in a review, that we would be encouraging them to put our sites, if they were our sites, on that website.
Or the other way around, yes.
The way it would work.
The only question would be is that I will assume then we'll ask all businesses to reaffirm that they are going to offer that, because many have now changed owners.
It says review, so.
So through you, Mayor, that's probably not, we can advertise and encourage, but the relationship between whether they're a breastfeeding friendly, and this is where we would have the leadership, where we would have the decal on the front door, but generally it's the Breastfeeding Association and the private or commercial establishment that have the relationship. We would just demonstrate leadership by being a breastfeeding friendly office.
Mr. Mayor, if I might answer that.
Certainly.
In the past, the Opal program actually headed that up and ensured that community are aware that they could in fact become a part of that.
The Opal project of the state. Thank you. Okay. You were closing, Councillor, I believe.
Close.
I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Motions without notice, councillors. Councillor Yench.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Due to what I regard as a significant amount of conversation we've had with the new barrier going in front of this council office, and for one, I am pleased that we are treating staff safety and that of the community seriously. It needs to be done. Irrespective, we have a loss of 4 car parks. My motion is that when staff and councillors are attending this office, they park in the appropriate car park at the back of the council office or in the car park that is not on, that is on the other side of Railway Terrace. In essence, they do not park their vehicles in front of businesses and shops, obstructing other people going to those shops and businesses for hours on end. It is highly insulting. I have had comments from at least one business. I have not sought to have conversed with others, but they are concerned that already their clientele is now finding it difficult to get in because these cars are parked there for hours. So the motion is that all staff and councillors attending meetings or whatever at this office will park in those two areas rather than in the main street.
Can we just firm that up, councillor? So when you say the rear car park, you mean the Murray Street car park?
Correct. Just that because we have one councillor who has a disability issue, and that car park is probably more suitable for that individual to gain easier access into the office.
Mr Mayor, can just as a question.
Yeah, if you have a question, if you have a question.
Is the elected member allowed to move that when we would have procedures in place for parking and all that sort of thing? Surely that is a
Request.
I'll have to look it up, but I'm sure we'd have some sort of procedure in there, like parking fines and all those sort of things.
I'm going to ask the CEO to just talk about how we can or we have directed staff around this. Bridget?
As soon as the works began over a week or so ago, I sent a note to all staff asking that they not park in the front. Generally, it's the INA staff who come in early in the morning who park there for a couple of hours, but all staff have now been asked to either park in the car park at the back or in the car parking facility across the road.
So the question would be, before I get a seconder, can we direct councillors where to park?
Through you, Mayor, I would suggest that it's encouraging and councillors to park across the road, or as in the case of a councillor who needs to use the disability car park in the back, we can organise access for that part of the car park.
No, the direction of the CEO to the staff, not this chambers.
Correct. I've done that, councillor.
So is it inappropriate for councillors to direct council staff in this area? Bridget?
Sorry, I missed the question, Mayor.
I'm just trying to make sure that the motion is somewhat in order. That it'd be inappropriate for councillors to direct where council staff park.
Correct.
So, councillor Jens, if we just...
I'm happy to have that removed.
So that when council members are attending the Coorong Civic Centre, they utilise the rear car park on Murray Street or the car park on Railway Terrace. I don't see anything wrong. Is there a second? It's probably more my question. Councillor Leng is the second.
I would change, I would second it with where you have car park. It is an off-the-street car park. Car park dust infers car parking along the main street of Railway Terrace.
I'm happy with that addition, thank you.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, in principle, I agree with this. If we're here for many hours on end, we certainly probably should consider our main street traders. But I do wonder where people, including councillors, are popping in for a 15-minute meeting or 10-minute that they should be seen the same as the general public. So I'm really running around timing rather than that. So if we had time parking in the main street, are we talking 15, 20, half an hour? So I think that should be appropriate for councillors as well.
So I'm going to ask James to just tell us roughly what the time parking is in the main street for everyone's benefit.
Yes, through you, Mr.
That's
Mayor,
we
there
could all
is
be fined.
time parking out the front of the main street here, which to the best of my knowledge, and I can head out there and have a look, but I think it's 1 hour parking maximum.
Post office.
9 till 5.
I mean,
In 9 to 5, so that's a general restriction in that area. Councillor Taylor.
Never gets fined.
Mayor, I think there's an inherent danger anyway with instructing people where they can and cannot park. Council members are all ratepayers as well. Whilst most people park in front of the building, since it was pointed out to us that we shouldn't be parking in front of the building. I certainly haven't parked in front of any of the businesses myself. However, this should be time sensitive, and time should be written into this motion if it's going to go ahead, because I often call in to the council building and then may go to the post office, but not move the car. So it's all well and good to try and lock people into parking in a certain place. But I can also see other councillors who will be popping frequently Foodland, into the hardware store, into the post office during the week, etc., who would not want to have to be lugging their purchases across the car park. So if we're talking about an hour, as per what James has just said about the car parking, then I would want that put into.
Councillor Roundtree.
I'm a bit perplexed by this one, Mayor, because in all my time coming to Tailem Bend, I've never seen the car parks all full that someone had to drive on by because they couldn't get a car park. And I think if you had made your way to Tailem Bend because you needed to go to a store, the fact that you couldn't park directly out the front of that store would not discourage you from actually going to the store to get what you need. There are so many problems with this, as far as, for instance, when I hurt my leg, and I had this silly scooter, I didn't want to cross the road on my scooter. So there are all sorts of things that could come up. And yes, whilst we have a person on council that needs to use disability, other people might not be having a great day and might feel that they need to be a bit closer for whatever reason. I just think there's so many problems with this, and it's prescriptive, and it really doesn't achieve much, except maybe a council's heard from a trader that it is a problem. It's nonsensical in my opinion, and I'll be voting against it.
Councillor Arthur next.
Just, this is a round robin competition. Some time ago, staff cars were to be parked out front as a safety measure. Then that was stopped, and elected members were encouraged when they come to meeting to park their cars out the front as a temporary barrier. Now, and I've parked out the front for ages. Now, I would, because of that being a safety barrier for the staff inside, but now I'll park over the other side of the road, which I have today. It's quite simple. That park has been there, and there's not many shops along here that you can't get a park.
Councillor Bowman and then Councillor Tale. Tale, you got a point of order, though, or a question? No, I'm asking you your question.
The question is, what's the penalty if you park? What's the penalty if you park outside of the hardware store when there's a council meeting in progress? Having said that, most councillors aren't building.
Park at the moment, so that's directly in front of the building where we've now stopped parking. So we're only restricting 1 hour parking 10 to 5, the daytime.
Is that all the street or just that the front?
I don't know. Fine, just directly in front of the hall doors. So I'm going to go to Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Generally walks the meeting, Councillor, don't you?
Yes.
There's one.
Now, I've been in Tailem Bend 38 years, and I quite often visit Railway Terrace. Now,
If I don't, Councillor.
yes. Now, when I've gone down there, at times you could shoot a gun down there, you wouldn't hurt anybody, right? But other times, when I've driven down there, I said to my lady friend, I've got troubles, I can't turn around my four-wheel drive. You know why? Because there's so many cars in the street. Yeah, it's good, especially when you go down towards the bakery. But it's got a wide turning circle, Mr Mayor, you've got to go right down the police station and come back. So that's a good problem, I reckon, the business is driving. However, probably about 3:30ish when the kids get out of school and then a high school roll up, it is very hard to get a car park. And I think council probably down the track, and I'll probably be putting a motion to the I&A committee later on, Mr Mayor, that we put in road counters each end of Railway Terrace for interest. And, you know, years ago, and Neville might know this, I think up to the 70s, on the western side, there was angle parking, which would save you a lot of rent.
wait for the complaints. Trust me.
And if you look farther around us in this room. Anyone else wish to speak to this motion without notice?
Mr Mayor, I think that if we are going to do this, we would assume that the INA department, or our inspector may actually have to write his first ticket.
Such as life, councillor.
Such is life. Just
is
be
life.
aware that it can be done. That's all I'm saying.
I would take it as advice to councillors. It says utilise. I would suggest that council wouldn't want to be a consistent marker in front of the building if they wanted to stay an elected member forever. CEO?
I'm just going to say through you, Mayor, I would not be keen that the first ticket we ever wrote was for a councillor.
Maybe not, but that's not. Everyone's had a speech to this Councillor Jens. We'll close, I think.
Mr Mayor, could I just ask the CEO one question?
Yes.
Would this mean we would have to change our terms and conditions for parking? Because we do have conditions and one of them is an hour's parking. So we would then have to include into that policy that regarding the elected members, because the elected members are then being made a specific group other than a normal person. CEO?
Are we able to just change that to they are encouraged to utilise, and then they're not really being
I'm happy to have that.
encouraged to utilise the
How
rear
about
car park?
let the CEO respond? He's getting dug into a spot.
I would, through you, Mayor, I tend to agree that the word encourage is probably much more suitable in terms of the discussion rather than, because at the end of the day, we don't do a lot of policing or compliance because we only have one person who has that position. And also, can I suggest that, as Councillor Roundtree said, everybody's circumstances changes from day to day, and sometimes you may have to park somewhere that's a bit more suitable and practical, and on other times, but as a general rule, it's the word encouragement to park where customers, where you bar entrance to customers who may be wanting to visit a business. And if you're there for the next 3 or 4 hours, then I think it would be not unreasonable to expect you to park across the road.
Okay. Councillor Jens, you were going to words encouraged to utilise.
I'm happy to have encourage.
They are encouraged to utilise. Does that look all right in words? Councillor Lang, you happy with that?
Yes.
Any further debate?
How do we access the rear council car park?
I think that would be more if you need to for a disability.
It is a secure area.
That's my point.
You can get a fob.
Councillor Jens, you're going to wind it up, please.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr Mayor. And that is that I have to admit I'm a little bit disappointed that this has taken so long. The reality is it's about respect for our businesses. The reality is not about punishing councillors. If you are in shopping and you're a councillor, yes, you park where you need to park. If you're going into the shop for 5 minutes and going to the council office for 5 minutes, yes, you park where you need to park. But that's common sense. It's unfortunate when common sense gives way to emotive. I'm happy with this motion. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried. Councillors voting against the motion are councillors Arthur, Taylor and Roundtree. The other councillors are voting for the motion, which means it's carried. Is that correct, councillors? Carried. Okay. Any other motions without notice? Sorry, Councillor Roundtree.
Thank you,
Motions
Mayor.
without notice, yes.
Yes, correct. Thank you. Just to ensure that training double-ups don't occur in the future and for transparency, I'd like to move that council update the elected members or council members training register to ensure it includes all personal development training attended by elected members, and that a copy of the training register be uploaded to the council's website once completed.
there a seconder? Councillor Taylor is the seconder. The councillor, you can speak to that.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's important that we have a good understanding of the types of personal development training that is offered, who's undertaken those courses, when they were undertaken, so that we know what training the councillors have done. This is to stop monopolising training opportunities, making sure we don't go over budget with training, and so that we can all see what we've done and what probably needs to be done if there's any knowledge gaps in people's learning. I just think the training register, I haven't seen one. I realised that back in 2016 was the last reference I could find to the elected members training register. I think it's probably an important document that we update and get online. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor is the seconder, please. The CEO, there is a training register that we could have or should have.
We do.
Or did have.
We do have one. Through you,
Did
Mayor.
or do?
We do.
Right. Right. So and that's not online at the moment.
Sorry, Mayor, somebody came in and spoke to me. Are you talking about for councillors or for staff?
Councillors.
So for councillors, it's a spreadsheet that Deb keeps a track of all training that's taken place. It's not online, is my understanding, but Ben's in the back of the room. He might be able to confirm one way or the other.
Yeah. Ben.
The Mayor, it's when the website shifted platform, that was one of the few files that dropped off. We'll reload it.
So the answer is when it was one of the other ones that when the website shifted to its new platform that it didn't make the transition. Okay.
I have just a clarification point here. Not all professional development, and that sort of leaves this a little bit open, is done on behalf of council. So I'm just making the point that it includes all professional development conference attended by council members on behalf of council.
Yes.
And funded by council.
Well, no, you can do it on behalf of without any funding, funded and or funded by council.
I think the
Not all
council
things we've
members
tended been
training
funded
register. So if you do it on behalf of council, we'll be there.
and or funded by council, if that's what the intent is.
The intent is, through you, Mayor, the intent is to document who's undertaken training and at what year they undertook that training, so that you don't do bullying and harassment training in one year, then do it again the second year and then the third year, which is a cost to council and to our ratepayers, when possibly you only need to do that once to get a good grip of it. So if we know who's done what and when they've done it, I think it gives us an idea of who still needs to go and do some training, who's actually done a lot of training and good at it, and where the gaps might be. I think it's quite simple.
Councillors, you'd be aware that after the general election of councillors, we're obliged to do.
Yes.
I don't think that's changing in the updated Local Government Act.
Yep.
It'll be enforced. I'm sorry, Councillor Bell, I tell you what you're saying, but I believe it's there.
Well, for example, the bullying, most professions have a bullying training program that if we chose not to do it through here would be very similar, that would not be required for council to pay for. I'm just saying that there are a lot of crossovers for some people.
And perhaps the training register could have, if the council has actually funded it or done it in another forum. It's not about who's paying for it really, it's about who's done it and is there a knowledge gap and do we need to fix that knowledge gap? Because what I want to avoid, and it comes up later, is training for training's sake, that we do what we need to do the job and nothing more, nothing less. But I don't know who's done what and whether it's required. And for instance, to do courses at near to the end of our term that probably ought to have been done in the beginning of our term makes no sense.
Okay.
So through you, Mayor, we can circulate the current spreadsheet for councillors' interest.
Any further debate? You're closed, councillor, or I'm considering you closed. Thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Any further motions without notice? And I would note the CEO leaves us at 5.
So through you, Mayor, given we haven't proceeded very far with the meeting, I will, or to the point, I'll log off and I'll go back to my motel room and I'll log back on.
So we might do that. We might have a break at 5 o'clock to allow that to happen seamlessly, Bridget.
Thank
What time
you.
is it? You should be at 5 o'clock now.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, sorry, that's where you are. Okay, councillors, a 10-minute break, please. Going to item number 8.1, which is general government. There's a recommendation there. Councillor Qualman, are you moving that way? I'm going to go with Councillor Taylor. That's all right. Any discussion around that? Councillor Taylor.
Excellent timing.
In relation to?
Yeah, I don't know.
Elections.
Oh, the federal election. Yes, there's a year to go, councillors. It's probably this year, not next. You're around that, and people ask, what do I think our priorities are? It would be obviously Murray-Darling. It would be housing, obviously roads, and particularly seeing what other road funds would be out there potentially for something like Heinrich Road.
You'd think the Coorong?
Coorong, Murray-Darling, and that sort of thing. That's the potential ones in my immediate head, and I'll welcome any councillors emailing, talking to me about what they think we should try and do. Councillor Bland, you've got a question, or are you speaking to it?
I'm going to speak to it. In relation to this, the previous intent was to attend this, but also to attend the Mayor Minute line that goes to Parliament House, and normally 4 or 5 key issues, and you've just identified a number of those. In the past, depending on the issue, a short briefing paper was given and left behind with the appropriate minders, not necessarily depending on who you get in to see. I would hope that we will assist in drafting those up for you to take along, and that we will see a copy.
Bridget, you got something to add to that? You unmute.
No, that is it. No, through you, Mayor. That's the intention.
Not going to get you to speak anymore for a second, because the speakers are like at a conference.
Can you hear me?
Vastly too loudly.
Sorry. I look like I'm in a jail. That's just the motel wall.
Yeah, we're going to be in a jail too if we don't get your volume down a bit, please. Just hang on.
How's that? I'll try.
No.
We're having Rex.
This. How are we going now?
Test, test.
It's too much, yeah. Hang on. Got no ears left. Bridget, just trying to work out how to tone down your volume.
I've just turned me down this end. How does that sound?
You turn yourself down that end, otherwise we're going to turn you down some other way. Right. I take on board, councillor, while we play with that. Councillor Jens, yes, sorry.
It's all right. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I concur with Councillor Bland. Traipsing up the hill is very important. My advice is make your appointments ASAP with the ministers or their advisors well in advance. Do not leave it for the day or a few weeks prior. And it does give great opportunity. Worth attending. It is worth attending the traipsing up the hill.
Thank you. So, it is a sitting week. Further debate around the recommendation. Close, it'll be you, Councillor Corman.
I just want to make a comment that we have all the confidence in you, Mr Mayor, representing us in good trust.
Very kind, but we want to hope we have the seating done by then. Just hang on. I will put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Bridget, could we give you a go again, just softly with your voice, please?
How softly?
It's going to be better. You can now come back to normal condition, I think. Just speak a little bit about something.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Even a bit louder.
Fraction louder.
A fraction louder? No problem.
About that.
That's good.
Okay.
Member of the public, Peter, can you hear her? That's what we want to know. Thank you. That motion was carried, councillors. We move to whatever the next item is, which is council members' professional development. Where are we? Here we are. So there's some choices there, councillors. I can take them separately or as a block.
Probably separately, Mayor.
Certainly, I can take, there's three separate ones. It doesn't mean that a bit later on you can't nominate, the way I read it. So I think, where we go, number one, can someone move, they want to move, please?
How can you move a motion when there's no one named?
Well, nominate yourself then, if that's the case, isn't it?
Through you, Mayor, there are also people named in the report who have actually expressed interest.
I'd be interested if they still want to go, that's my point. The Inch, number one.
I'd like to go, thank you.
Right, so
First one.
anyone else in the first one around the prevention and management of bullying and harassment in or out of the council, out of the chamber on the 2nd of May of the Women's Local Government Association. Councillor Lang, are you seconding that or you are offering to go?
I would like to go, thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
Mr Mayor, I was probably the third one in that, but I've chosen to withdraw. I've done quite a bit of that just recently through another
Forum, that's what your point is. Anyone else? Okay, can someone move that way, please? You're allowed to move yourself, I think. I need a mover. Councillor Bland. You're a seconder. Councillor Lang. Any debate around this? Number one. Councillor Roundtree, then Councillor Qualmer.
This leads to my previous comment that I think in case of certainly the two attendees that have been long-time members on this council and even an ex-mayor, that to consider that we need to pay money for them to undertake this training is closing the gate after the horse is bolted, and probably something they ought to.
Be careful.
And probably something they ought to have already known, and I won't be supporting this motion.
Okay. Councillor Taylor, be careful.
Through you, Mayor. No, I won't be supporting it either. I think if there's any training to be had in this area, it needs to be to the whole council and it needs to be here. And I just don't see any point in two people attending. It's too late in the game. We're only a year and a half away from another election. So this should have come up as something that the council should have done training in right at the start. So I'm not going to support it.
Councillor Corman, you going to speak to it? Or?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, some of my questions just been answered. I had concerns that it wasn't going to be done here, and I had concerns getting away at times. And plus, I would think it'd be cheaper to be done here. So I'm not supporting it either, but I would like to see all of them done here in the chambers at Parliament as a whole council. Thank you.
I would, in relation to this item, except if someone wished to move an amendment, that they wish that this course to be done at this chamber.
2023 for the next committee is elected.
I would say in the very near future, but it is, if I can read it, it's being led by another council mayor, I think. And so I'm simply putting that to you. If you wished for all of the chamber to have this program or this educational program that council could ask to be done here. Councillor Taylor. So you want to move an amendment
Next round.
that this be offered to all elected members in this
Course,
council
all
chamber,
elected
this course.
And through you, Mayor, I mean,
Need a seconder?
and through you, Mayor, is it not more appropriate that this is done during the next cycle of councillors? I mean, we are coming to the end of our term. To me, it's, look, we don't have a huge budget in this area, and I think we should put it to good use when it's needed.
$50. $25 each. That's the cost.
It's fine as an amendment, isn't it? Yep. I have an amendment.
What's the amendment now?
People can remember back, we did have some motions and commitments around this area for this chamber.
We see what the cost is going to be first.
For all elected members, they should.
To speak, Councillor Taylor, to the amendment, please.
The question, Mayor, which is of the CEO, what is the in the training budget for elected members?
Bridget, what's the remainder in the training budget for elected members?
Through you, Mayor, from memory, I think it's about $9,000.
The 2021.
Would have to check the exact amount, but it's, I think it's around about 9,000.
Enough for this course.
So through you, Mayor, I believe that this one particularly is important for all of the elected members, because in this instance, then it's impossible to turn around and say that training was not given, training was not received. It will have a higher cost implication, of course, but with that amount of cash in the budget, very few of us have done any extra training, apart from the training which was offered right at the start. It's a completely different matter for the other two. That's my reasoning for this one particularly.
Councillor Roundtree, the seconder, you want to speak?
No.
Any other councillors for or against it? Councillor Yench, yes, this is.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors believe that it is disappointing that short course when it is relevant no matter what time term you are in within council. Harassment are totally unacceptable. As a consequence, I believe it's also important to do it in the broader setting, to do it just as this chamber, with the issues that unfortunately this council has gone through, I believe is inappropriate. I think it's more appropriate to do it in the bigger organisation where you are able to compare notes with other councils. And it's important. That networking and sharing of concerns and or fears is important. But to do it in isolation is in some respects, I believe, defeating the purpose. So I'll be opposing the amendment.
Thank you.
Question?
Councillor Bland's got a question.
Just following through on the discussion that's happening, and should we go down the amendment line, is it possible then to consider, for two reasons: one, to address some of the costs, and two, to have some of that cross-fertilisation that we actually invite other councils such as East Murray, wherever else that there may be councillors who are unable to attend, would like to attend the forum here.
Certainly, councillor, that would be ideal. I don't know if it needs to be added to the motion.
No, but I'm putting it out there as food for thought that if we go down that track, that we can address two of the issues, but also assist other councils.
Make your point, councillor. Okay, anyone else speaking to the amendment? For or against? Okay. Where are we? You'll close, councillor.
Close.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. It becomes the motion. 2 against. Councillors Ling and Yench are against it. It's become the motion. Any further amendments or debate? Okay, I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Ling, you didn't signify.
Did I?
No, you didn't. For or against, councillor? Against, so it's carried 8-1 with councillor, 7-1, sorry, 7 councillors for and councillor Ling was against. Those 7 were in favour of that. Right, item number 2 of this recommendation, strategic thinking is strategic seeing on the 7th of July. Does any councillors wish to nominate themselves for that?
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Bland, are you the first of the, what you're saying, or are you asking a question?
No, I would like to nominate that, and the reason being it's been some time, so I think it's relevant to this council that we do strategic thinking. It's not something I get to do a lot of in my other professional life. I'm certainly interested in that side of it.
Councillor Yench,
I am also
nominating
interested
for
in
that.
attending. Thank you.
Councillor Ling.
Likewise.
Is there anyone else who wishes to go to that?
Mr Mayor, in my opinion, 2 people out of a council go to a strategic thinking session is probably wrong. And we look at probably 2 of our longest serving councillors, one being an ex-mayor. So I suggest we move an amendment exactly the same as the first one. If we send it to all the members. We need all members strategically thinking, not just 2. So I would move a motion, an amendment, same as the wording before, Ashley, except that we look about providing that strategic thinking and strategic seeing forum for all elected members in situ.
I'm happy to second that, Mayor.
This is part of a series that's been done by the LGA.
Yep.
This, in item 2, this is part of a series at LGA House. At what time? Day? Is it sort of a 3 to 6 sort of thing?
Through you, Mayor.
Yeah, Bridget, please.
Yes.
I understand the intent of doing it in-house. The cost to do that is probably more than what LGA are offering these courses for. So it would be, and I'm only guessing, but generally I would suggest that it is more expensive for us to bring a consultant in to do it in-house than the price that LGA has probably got and leveraged with a organisation to do it on behalf of all of local government across South Australia. I just need councillors to be aware that it won't come cheaper doing it in-house if cost is the issue.
Councillor Arthur, you are still wishing to move an amendment?
Sorry?
Still wishing to move an amendment?
Yes, I am. You know, it may be done by Zoom by the LGA into the premises here with everybody present. It may be done by a person.
Are you the mover of a similar to the first words?
Yes. And also, don't forget, this will be in next year's budget because it's the 7th of July.
Paid before.
correct. We don't have a mover and seconder for the initial. That the initial document, well, if there's no more councillors are nominating for the initial motion, I don't have a mover or a seconder. So, Councillor Yentz will move. There a seconder? Councillor Bland, thank you. So let's leave it open for the amendment. Councillor Arthur.
Mr. Mayor, do we have an idea of what the costs will be to attend? It's probably written in there somewhere, but what is the cost of attendance at this?
$265 a person, is it not?
Is that inclusive of mileage and accommodation, or is accommodation required?
That's just the course.
It wouldn't be accommodation.
No accommodation.
No.
Just a day.
Yeah.
Usually an afternoon of these sort of things.
I think it's 365.
You've moved that this be offered to all councillors here. Same words as the first one, councillor. Is there a seconder? Councillor Roundtree. Is there any debate around this?
Have a question.
No.
Zoom was mentioned before, and I think from getting the same information across the state that the LGA will be delivering to councils, is it possible to ask to be able to be zoomed in as a council from this centre to the course, rather than having to try and duplicate these courses?
So, a good question, councillor, and given the timeframes of our next meeting, I'm looking at the CEO now. Will we seek this information and leave the rest of it lay on the table or in abeyance, pending that advice?
So we can find that out probably quite quickly to see whether Zoom, we tend to know when the information comes out whether Zoom's available or not.
So councillors, would you be prepared to leave the balance of these recommendations until we seek that advice?
Leave it lay on the table,
So
whatever it's.
if someone moved that.
I have a question, Mayor.
Yes.
The question would be that even if it was Zoomed, there would still be an individual 300 and whatever it is cost.
Find that out. We've got a special meeting coming up in a couple of weeks, so I think the timeframes allow us
Might be cheaper.
to defer this recommendation. I need someone to move that this item be adjourned. Councillor Taylor and Qualman. I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Section 3, Council, Section 270, review, internal review of a council decision. We had a workshop, councillors, around this subject. Is there someone wish to move? Councillors Roundtree and Taylor, I'm going to take on this one. You want to move the recommendation in both parts?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Wish to speak to it?
No, I think it speaks for itself. Thank you.
Are there any other councillor wishes to comment on that extensive report? Bridget, do you need to respond to it?
No, Mayor, I think that, as Councillor Roundtree said, the workshop and then the report speaks to the issues.
Okay. Move Councillor Roundtree, seconded Councillor Tale is what I've decided around that subject. You'll close.
Close.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Agenda item 9 is council policies, cemeteries and memorials. My first question, if I may ask one, is in this policy it says we require 5 days, working days actually, notice. Is that the same as the previous policy, or in a discussion recently at a memorial service, that was probably the issue? Some funeral directors.
To you, Mayor, James, are you aware if it's the same as the last one? I'm not, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, there was some changes to this policy. one of them being increased from 5 days to 3 days wasn't quite enough notice in some cases where we had to get rock excavation, especially during Tale and Bend. We increased that. We also made some changes about trinkets and decorations on grave sites. The previous policy said that they weren't allowed. This policy says they are, providing they don't impact another interment right holder or they're not unsightly or offensive in their nature. So,
To you, Mayor, even if it's 5 days, if there's an exception, there will always be a discussion like there was last year where we were able to provide a service with 24 hours notice. So there'll always be an exception, but the standard would be 5 days.
The reason I raised the subject is for some burials or interments, the family has come from other places and they wish to get the funeral done so they can return, and that could be sometimes interpreted as a way of delaying having the service. It's 5 working days. That's the principal issue. Just wondered if that was what we were in the previous policy. Councillor Bland. It was
My understanding it was 3 previously.
Yeah, that's what
I
Jamie said.
understand that the problem is, so I'm assuming the problem is where it's a pre-owned site, prepaid site, where that would be an issue, whereas a lot of the other sites that are not, my understanding is that we actually have some prepared dug sites. Therefore, it shouldn't be an issue unless it's a pre-owned. That's probably not the right wording. I apologize. The other addition to this one, I think also that is good to see is natural burials. Okay. I think that must be a change. I know we had a long discussion before. I don't remember it actually getting in before, but I think that is a good.
Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Roundtree.
Through you, Mayor, I can't find a specific bit on 5 days, but would it be appropriate to add in there an addendum which is something like, unless there are extenuating circumstances?
through you, Mr. Mayor, it does state in here, and again, I can't find the exact wording, but
Neither
it
can
says
I.
lesser period can be accepted upon application, basically. So the status quo is 5 days. If you come to council asking for 24 hours or 48 hours, if we can accommodate it, we will. Definitely.
Can you see where that is, James?
Yes.
I have a question while we're doing that.
I've got a question, yeah.
And that is in relation to the actual cemetery facilities where it says open and then closed, and we've got 3 closed ones. What work do we actually do at the closed ones now?
Bedford Cemetery had a fire. Exposed the rabbits.
That we're on a maintenance list.
Yeah, and I don't know how closed is.
Closed means we don't do anything. The way I read that, I want to know that closed is that we're actually maintaining that space, given the history on some of these areas.
Certainly. So in relation to the Sherlock Cemetery, I have had approaches from people who may wish to be buried there. No particular secret, the digging's relatively hard at Sherlock. But anyway, I'm just trying to find the 5 days, because I picked it up because this was the particular issue raised with me.
Before 3.6, it is notice of interment funeral directors. Provide a
Yes,
minimum
it
of 5
is.
working days.
Yes,
Before 3.6, Mr. Mayor.
dot point 3 and
Yep,
3.
dot point 3. Thank you, councillors. So that'll be, perhaps discuss that in a second. Councillor Roundtree, while we're on this.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, should the word burials be removed? Because really the title just becomes cemeteries and memorials, and I wasn't quite sure why burials was removed from the heading. That's my first question. Then I wanted clarification on the burial of human remains on private property, because there is the SA government's burial of human remains on a private property states the burial of human remains on a private property outside of a municipal council or a township may be carried out at the discretion of the property owner and the local public health authority. Does this council allow for people who apply? Because there is, I'm pretty sure I saw on the website an application form, Lynn, if you wanted to have a burial on a private property. Just wanting clarification on that point.
I might say that it's been refused in my time, but certainly a lot of people interested in.
There's about
going.
Absolutely, yeah.
About 5 years ago, there was one which the council allowed.
Yes.
Did, and
There was
prior to that
application
one,
and it was council allowed it. So
we
I
knocked
was
them back
going
previously.
to ask about that myself, about the disposal of human.
And the reason, well, and the reason is too that looking at the information on this, you can nominate to council the site, the GPS coordinates, and have it identified on council records as a burial site. And I think you lose the right to, if you sell the property, you don't have access to it anymore, but that's the risk you take. But if it's a family farm that's been in the family for 100 years or so, and you want to be buried with other people perhaps buried on the family farm, then was there, and can there be a provision for that to still occur? And my last point then on number 4, policy responsibility, I think somewhere through the document, we're still referring to the Director of Infrastructure and Assets, and that might just need to be tidied up.
So through you, Mayor, unless James knows the answer to the questions that Councillor Roundtree is raising, we will take that on notice and go back and have another look.
I'll send you them in an email. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor. I'm going to move her a second. I think we're going through some anomalies or questions.
So through you, Mayor, the notice of interment, it actually states where less notice is provided, the Director of Infrastructure Assets, Chief Executive Officer, may advise that the requested proposed interment cannot be accommodated. Should that not be can or cannot be accommodated? Because it seems to suggest that it will go ahead unless, or is it suggesting that it can go ahead whatever if they don't hear anything?
The intent is that we will try and accommodate, so we'll make sure those words provide some clarity.
Thank you.
Councillors wish the policy to be tidied up a bit and brought back at the next meeting.
yes, Mr Mayor, can I move that it lay on the table?
So that will come up at the next ordinary meeting with a few changes, and they are around burials on properties. I think 5 working days is giving some grief, and the interpretation of that.
Clarification of closed.
I'll second
Going to
that.
close. So move Councillor Land, seconded Councillor Arthur, that this item lay on the table.
Adjourned.
Adjourned.
Adjourned, sorry.
Too old for this.
No, sorry.
Too old for this. This item be adjourned. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. No, Councillor Arthur was the seconder. Number 2, revocation of council members' induction policy. Councillors, recommendation. I'll move that way if you wish. Councillor Lang, you're moving that way, I hope?
Correct.
Yes. For a seconder. Councillor Yench, thank you. Either you wish to speak to this?
No.
Anyone? Councillor Roundtree.
I wasn't sure about adopting this recommendation. I just wanted extra information, but I would suspect that that's probably Deb's department and she's not here. So I was going to ask her to just explain.
I'll ask the CEO.
So through you, Mayor, this was removed because local government basically have an induction program. It's superfluous to requirements, if you like, because there is already a consistent and standard procedure. Once a new council comes in for their term and the induction process, it follows LGA guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further debate around this recommendation? Thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Item 10, section 41, committee, Councillor Qualman. You're moving that way. Thank you. Councillor Taylor, are you the seconder?
I am.
Yeah, any debate around those minutes? Or debate, you can't debate minutes, but discussion. We're closing.
Mr Mayor, before.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, but to accept the asset management plan and all the others that we received, I think a lot more work needs to be done on them. And I've printed them off and started on them, and there's a lot of queries I have within them. So, and we were supposed to get them back. Part of it was by the 15th, the other by the 25th.
Well, the 18th is the day.
Doesn't really leave enough time for debate. And I believe that part of those, all those asset management plans, the building asset management plan, the road management plan, really need a little bit of workshopping to do about it, because there are, and particularly part of equipment, you know, like, not an expertise on that, so I went and saw someone who is in that business, and he picked that many pieces in what we had. So, you know, like I think they are big documents. They're a big part of the way we run our business. So a little bit more time needs to be done.
At this stage, you've got till the 18th of May, which is when? Today.
Today.
Yes, thank you.
The documents have provided are our existing asset management plan. So no work has been done to update them at the moment. So the idea of seeing back right now is so that your feedback can be updating of those documents. So if you feel like we need to have additional workshops, we can facilitate that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd appreciate that. I emailed James with a few comments in relation to weed management and updating the other ones. I just haven't had time. Would appreciate a bit more time, or at least some, even if it's just the committee sitting in the room together going through them. I don't mind.
Councillor Ling.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. The question without notice again raises its head, as highlighted by Councillor Roundtree earlier. It might be appropriate that the answers be recorded to questions without notice at these particular 41 meetings, because I would like to know also what the results are, or the answer was for how do you report road damage or whatever it was. You know, there's some questions there that it would be appropriate for all councillors to be aware of the responses, not just responded to.
So, Councillor, thank you. I noted earlier that we're going to seek some advice around this recording of questions without notice, because we need to ensure everyone's fully aware of what's going on. But at the same time, I would believe that they are questions without notice, not statements or motions without notice, or policies without notice. So I think I take on board what you're saying. I think we just need to seek some advice on whether we can do it better, differently, or better delineate it.
I agree, and I believe the Local Government Act, when it was changed, this council was recording responses, the full response to questions without notice previously. That was changed. We're now not seeing it anymore, but the Local Government Act, I believe, is only specific to general meetings, not to Section 41s or other committee meetings.
Okay.
That may need clarification as well.
Taken on board. I still have a motion somewhere. Where's it gone? Councillor Coleman, you moved it, I think. Yeah, and I'll
Just we finished, do we close it?
Yeah, well, if everyone else is done, yeah, you close it, please, yes. Done. It's pretty straightforward. We received the minutes of the I&A committee. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, do you want a motion in relation to having a workshop?
No, I think given the discussion we've had and the CEO and me, I think we need to revisit that whole sector of meeting procedure, either full council or committee.
Sorry, I'm actually referring to the plans.
I take it that we've effectively got another month to respond. The chair of committee has alluded to we might need a workshop. Perhaps we need to discuss that very soon. We have a new director arriving, I understand, the last day of this month as well. I don't think we need to do any more, Councillor. Finance committee meetings, item 2. Want to move that way, please? Councillor Yanch, Councillor Roundtree, any discussion? Councillors? Closed. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Local action plan minutes. This is the first reinvigoration of the LAP committee. Is that right, councillors? Very good. Minutes are there. Is there a recommendation, councillors? Councillor Qualman and Councillor Arthur. Any discussion around their first new invigorated committee? Okay. I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Item 4, Menengi Cemetery Committee. And I might make this note. I couldn't find a reference in the policy to cemetery committees. About the cemetery policy. Did anyone notice anything in relation to it? So
I think it's because not everyone has a Section
I-
41 committee.
I'm aware of that, but I thought the policy may allude to it at some point. Or something else to pick up in that adjourned motion back, please. Anyway, nonetheless, they have beautiful minutes always. So I'll move that way, please. Councillor Bland and Councillor. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Item 11, Coorong Infrastructure and Access Committee, terms of reference review. Councillors.
Nominate Councillor Bland. He's willing.
I'll second that.
Actually, I'm going to decline.
So there's two.
I would like to remain on the committee.
The councillors declined the nomination. Sorry, I'm just reading this. Council resolves that this is item 2, that a councillor be the chairperson. So up to now, this has been the deputy mayor. That's different in the terms of reference.
It's just due for review, Mayor.
Okay. Do your term, is it? Okay. Thank you. Councillor Roundtree, are you going to do something?
Yes,
All
I'd like to nominate Councillor Arthur.
right. All right. I only one nomination like this. Councillor Arthur, you wish to go on chairing that committee?
Yes, I'll do that.
So that goes in the recommendation. Is everyone happy with the rest of the recommendation? Councillor Taylor?
Through you, Matt, question, would the membership, would the council members all want to be on rather than just keep it selective, or are councillors happy to leave it as it is? So it names membership as Arthur, Bland, Qualman and Roundtree. I'm just wondering about how the chamber now feels about membership of this committee.
You asking with the chair of committee or myself?
Either.
Well, I'll put my position. My view is that the committees don't need every councillor on it. The committee agendas are available to all councillors. Councillors can attend the meeting. I know that may frustrate some. The councillors can bring back any recommendation out of a council committee for debate when out of the minutes if required. That's my view, that it may somewhat defeat the purpose if every committee is every councillor. And in my view, I don't know that every councillor needs to be on the finance committee. That's what this council decided when it established it. That's why I think committees are here to shift some of the workload and the day-to-day stuff away from the full council so that council can focus strategically. I'm going to ask the chair of the committee what he thinks. Councillor?
Sorry, were you? Oh,
Yes, you.
I was reading.
I know. You think that all councillors could be on the committee, or it should be a number of?
Okay. All councillors can attend the meetings, but I just find I find it really a little bit messy with the finance committee, where you got 9 different views, where I reckon I would be a little bit bigger. But I'm whatever the members feel. I think if you poll the members and see what they want, if everyone wants to be on it, fine and dandy. If they don't, I think it's probably a workable, very easy workable number. I know James would have a comment on it because he's been tied up with it since it started. So, or if he wants to.
probably not James, it's probably the Chamber's view about who's on the committee.
Okay, I've got Councillor Quam and then Councillor Roundtree.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Number 6, council resolved committee determined dates and times and meetings maximum 4 times per annum. Now, we've currently, what we've been doing is actually, moving around the countryside, Sherlock, and the next one's at Meningie. Shouldn't that read there, and also to determine various locations in that recommendation? So we've got that flexibility so we can...
That you'd like. Yeah.
Through you, Mr Mayor, there's a motion within the committee that has already established times for the meeting and their location. So that previous motion that was passed by the committee would still stand.
I think the councillor's saying that item 7 is a little bit redundant or roundabout it there. So you'd say item 6, council resolves the committee will determine dates and times and locations of meetings with a minimum of 4 times a year.
Yes, thank you.
And eliminate item 7. It could well be this chamber. But given the committee's started to go out and look around, and that's accept. I haven't got a move for a second yet anyway. Councillor Roundtree.
Yes, so Councillor Coleman has picked up on one of my questions about the redundancy of point 7. I think with regards to, and this sort of goes back to what Councillor Lang was saying before too, if not all councillors are at the meeting, they don't get to see the answers to the questions without notice. And therefore, when we have this meeting and they're all voting to accept the minutes, they're really flying blind in some regards. So that does need to be tidied up, how we manage that. And perhaps in the interim, it would be useful if people who are interested in the assets and infrastructure, which is quite a big part of what council does, a huge part, to me, one of the biggest parts, they should all be coming along and having a listen and getting involved. The other thing is on point 8, I just wanted further explanation. Is what that sentence or those sentences referring to is the section 41 to-do list. So when it says the Director of Roads and Infrastructure will inform council at the next meeting of matters to be considered by the committee through the provision of a written report, is that like a to-do list? Just explain that sentence. I wasn't following that one.
So through you, Mayor, so there's a couple of parts to it. The section 41 committee makes recommendations to council, so the minutes are accepted, and then generally we will pull out of those section 41s, particularly the finance committee and the infrastructure and assets committee, things that have to come to full council for further debate. Remembering section 41s can't make a decision, so then if there is something in that meeting that needs to come to full council, not just the minutes, but also for further debate in council. So we'll pull that out. And you see from time to time that James will put up reports that originated in the infrastructure and asset committee and then come to the full council for further debate.
So through, Mayor, we had talked about, if we're looking at section 41s as a whole, and we're going down to something like the hall committees, those actions that come out of that, how are we tracking and recording those items, and how are we as councillors seeing that those jobs have been done and when they've been done, so we can report back? Because otherwise it feels like it goes into a bit of an abyss.
So through you, Mayor, we have, as I mentioned a couple of meetings ago, we now track those requests, and we will start from the 1st of June to put them in the info doc as well, so that they're visible to, so that the progress of the various requests can be, will be in the public domain.
Apart from nominating Councillor Arthur in point 2 and abolishing item 7 and merging it into 6, which makes only 9 items instead of 10, is on the screen. Is there someone prepared to move the recommendations? Councillors Roundtree and Coleman as the seconder.
At the exclusion of point 7, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's, as amended on your screen, it makes it only 9 points instead of 10. Actually squeezed it up. Just allows the committee will determine its locations. Closing, councillor.
Those.
All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Finance Committee work program update, item 2. Councillor Roundtree, you moving?
Yes.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Bland, speak to it? Yes, no, maybe? No. You up with it? Work program for the 2021 calendar year. Being no further debate, I'm going to put the motion, as is the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried unanimously. Item 3 is dog registration fees for the forthcoming financial year. Councillor Palmer,
I'll move that. Thank
you're
you,
moving
Mr.
that way. You're a seconder. Councillor Bland, you'll got that look of a question. Got that look of a question.
And my question is around, I can't remember exactly what the fees were before.
Your
And
question is,
have the fees gone up?
have the fees gone up?
By how much? Because we've certainly kept them down significantly and have very few dog problems, or appear to. Have they gone up?
Through your worship,
Oh.
no, they have no intention to raise them. They're the same as for the reason you've just said.
Very much, because I think it's been quite successful getting registered for a reasonable fee.
Standard and non-standard dogs. Looking for the standard dog. Councillor Lang did second the motion. Any further debate around item 3? There being none, I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Agenda item 12.1, Karkuma Road upgrade. There is a recommendation there, councillors. Councillor Arthur. I'm going to give you the pleasure of moving that motion, with Councillor Roundtree being the seconder. Councillors, any discussion around that recommendation? That we're simply applying for the funding through this special local roads program, but we are the #1 priority for the region in the priority list, so pretty surprised if we didn't get the strangest things have happened. Is there any debate around that? You're closing, councillor. I cannot believe you want to say something.
Hope we get the funding. That's as
The
simple
funding.
as that.
Thank you.
There'll be a lot of people that in the same boat, I can assure you.
Righto, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Number 2, unsealed roads program, very early this year, which is very pleasing for councillors' perusal. Any discussion?
Question?
Question?
Arundel Road doesn't have a classification. Why?
Through you, Mayor, is James.
Yeah, there would be. Sorry, James. Arundel Road's a...
Through, that's just a typo omission, apologies.
Is
It's
it a,
Class 4A road.
it is a 4A? I assumed it was, given your mail is a 4A, so I wasn't 100%.
No, that's the proposed roads to go into the budget we're discussing at the moment for the forthcoming financial year. There's about 40 kilometres of road there, to be quite honest. Right, any debate around that subject? Who's moved it? It's more the question. Councillors Lang and Bland. Any debate? Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously.
Can I ask one further question?
Yeah, around that subject, I trust.
Roads to be considered for additional funding. This is not listed in any priority order. Thank you. Just wanted to ensure that that wasn't a priority order. Thank you.
Reassess next year, but certainly. I move on to petitions, of which I have nil. Item 14, deputations, I have nil. Someone check, I have no public questions. An assumption. I don't think so. Please, Councillor Bland. Public question time, either by electronic or other means, we have none. So that's nil. We move to confidential items, councillors. With the recommendation to move into confidence there. Can someone move? Councillor Taylor, you want to go to the information document, do you?
Mayor,
Oh, yeah.
did we cover local action plan committee?
Yes.
Yep.
Must have missed it.
Yes.
Mr Mayor, we're going to do the documentation.
We can do the information document now if you wish. Yep. Information, items in the information document, councillors. Is that what you're starting with, Councillor Qualman?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through the chair to the Acting Director of Infrastructure and Assets. I see there was a write-up about the Tale and Bend toilets. There's two questions, please. A rough idea completion date? I know that's a big ask, with material shortage.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, we're still expecting to have the project completed by the end of financial year. We've got a 24th of May delivery date that has been confirmed to us from the supplier of the toilet block. So we're expecting to have that constructed before the end of the financial year.
Right. And second question through the chair to you, James, is I've had an inquiry by someone, and please could someone help me? Is in this new design, is there a parenting room or change room in the middle for, parents to?
Through you, Mr Mayor,
Nursing
there's
room?
a designated room that is not a toilet facility. So there's a parent toilet which has a baby change table in it, and it is DDA accessible, disability compliant. There is no separate room for parenting or breastfeeding.
So, Mr Mayor, it's in other words, it's a toilet, but it's got a table in with it. Separate room like that. Okay. Yep. Sounds good.
Other questions out of the information document, councillors?
Question really around Wadmore House. I know that we've moved some money, obviously, to the Canalpin pool. I'm just wondering, when we get the report, what was left? Because $10,000 moving out of there, and I've had a look quietly at the site this morning while it was in progress of doing some work. Certainly could have been spent on Wadmore House. I also understand that was trouble getting contractors to do so. So are we looking to finish off some of that work in the future for Wadmore House area?
Bridget, you want to just tackle that where we're at quite with the...
So back to the original comment, Mayor, we will bring a full report of what work has been done at Wadmore House. And if there wasn't any, if there were some aspects that weren't completed because of shortages of tradespeople, we'll also make a comment on that. But I'll bring that back and send a report through to you on the full scope of works that was done and if there was anything missing.
Hinging on this, and I get questions probably, I won't say every day because I try to avoid the street on some days so I can get home, is around when are we, and I've had this conversation with our CEO, actually going to public consultation, and until some of this work is complete so it can be.
So through you, Mayor, I've had discussions with the community team and they are scheduling it probably around June. Not probably, definitely around June. They're just looking at a date. We're trying to get a few high-level scoping sketches so that the community can look at what are options rather than going with a blank sheet, because sometimes that takes the process a little longer than expected. So we were trying to do some mock drawings of what might be available and identifying the blocks of land that we had purchased in the past. So a whole picture of the precinct and what's there and what might be available.
Other questions in the information document?
I had,
The Roundtree?
through you, Mr Mayor, it's probably not one that can be answered, but I saw we had a successful contractor. Is that private information about who that might be? Is that confidential?
What?
For the road reseal program.
I've signed that now, so I think that will remain confidential until it's all finished.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and one other question, is there any data yet on the traffic counters, or has that wound up? the 3 traffic counters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no,
James.
they haven't been collected and reported yet.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor
Yeah,
Arthur?
through you, Mr. Mayor, to James. How many graders are actually, how many shifts on the graders are working at the present
Through you,
and
Mr.
have been over the last 3 weeks?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we have one staff member from the Tale and Ben patrol grading team that's currently on sick leave. He's been backfilled by another staff member. However, the staff member that's backfilling him doesn't have the same shift arrangements, 12.5-hour shift, so he works his 8.5-hour days for those 3 days, normal duties for the other 2 days to allow his normal team to function. So that's been in place for approximately 3 weeks now. Staff member is transitioning back to work in the near future.
And what about the Meningie grader? Is that working full time? Because information I've been told that it's sort of hasn't moved been moved for about 7 days from one spot.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I am personally not aware of any long-term leave or other issues with that team.
It's just the other thing, it's not in the information document. Has the role been picked up from Emu Springs Road yet?
No.
It's been there for 3 months.
Been there, well, it cannot be
Yeah, and-
safely pulled with the hitch on the grader, councillor. Anything else in the information documents, since I'm trying to keep it tight? Councillor Ling and then Councillor Bland.
Before we proceed into confidence, I'd seek leave of the council. I have another meeting to attend.
Okay, thank you, councillor. So Councillor Ling will leave the meeting now. Thank you, councillor. Yeah, I'm aware of that. Councillor Bland.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, and Miles may be able to answer this one. We've got all the stats on the mosquitoes. Are we getting the health information about anyone who has actually had reported mosquito-borne diseases such as Barmer Forest? Normally we do get those. It's either the GPs aren't reporting. You certainly hear about it in the community.
Through your worship, I received statistics on the notifiable mosquito-borne diseases, but it's difficult to determine if the infection or if the infection occurred here in the Coorong District Council, because the majority of numbers are actually Metro Adelaide and could well have been people travelling anywhere. The numbers in terms of actual infections of people living in the district is extremely low. So we're only talking maybe 3 in 12-month period.
And that's on the assumption the medicos are actually reporting.
Absolutely right. And SA Health are quite keen to improve that and probably to improve the tracing of information. So to be able to determine and ask the person who's reported the illness as to where they've been travelling and have they an idea of when they might have been exposed. And I'd love that information as well, because I think, as I've kind of indicated, one of the spots that I'm a bit concerned about is Narung Campground.
Looking at the numbers there, it's quite high.
Yeah.
And the golf club.
So look, I'm involved in a statewide group that meets with SA Health, and we talk about these issues. And next year, hopefully, we might be able to try to get better information and better reporting so that we can target activity locally.
Thank you.
Anything else out of the information document, councillors? Okay. So for those watching the live stream, please be advised the meeting's about to move into confidence. Live stream will stop. For those who wish to view the end of the meeting, the video will be available on YouTube after today's meeting.